The honourable member Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's great to hear from my colleague from Essex and all of his great insights, and great to see him back here in this place. Thank you. We're here today to debate a motion of non-confidence in this Prime Minister and this government because the workers of Canada are hurting and the workers and Canadians are struggling. In the words of the leader of the NDP, the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. The leader of the NDP also said the Liberal government will always cave to corporate greed and will always step in to make sure unions have no power. And we agree, which is why we put forward this motion, which is why the NDP needs to stop propping up this Liberal government and vote non-confidence with us. That's what workers want. That's what Canadians want. They want a carbon tax election now. Madam Speaker, we saw with the Statistics Canada report on Friday just how much Canadian workers and Canadians are suffering after 9 years of this Prime Minister backed up by the NDP. StatsCan reported that Canada's GDP per capita had declined for 6 consecutive quarters. In other words, that's our standard of living falling, especially when compared to south of the border. There is now a $33,000 per year difference in income per person between Canada and the US, according to the IMF. Add to this the punishing carbon tax in Canada, and those worker paychecks are stretched even further. Food bank use in Canada reached 2 million, and 18% of those are workers. That's shameful. This very inflationary and tax policies of the Liberals, which have been supported all the way along by the NDP, have caused this cost of living crisis, and they are making Canadian workers and Canadians poorer. So it's no wonder that in 2023, we saw the highest number of work stoppages or interruptions in Canada since 1983, so that's 40 years. Because when inflation is running rampant and cost of living is out of control, workers rightly need more to get by to support their families. And so they are fighting for better wages everywhere. And Madam Speaker, while statistics point a damning picture of the economic carnage being inflicted on Canadians by this NDP Liberal coalition, beyond the statistics are real people, real workers, and their stories. And I remember speaking to steel workers in the floor of Stelco last winter. And of course, that's in Hamilton, and Hamiltonians have a reputation for grit and determination and hard work. It is the hammer, after all. And nowhere is that more evident than on the floor of Stelco. These workers work hard day in and day out to produce the steel that is so instrumental to our economy, and it's hot, heavy work, but it should also be rewarding work. These are union members, members of the United Steelworkers. And there was a steelworker named Travis that I spoke to that day who talked to me about how difficult it was as a young person to make ends meet. He had a good job, good wages, a union job, benefits, but inflation, taxes, housing costs were taking an increasingly larger bite out of his paycheck. And he worried that his colleagues who had young families were in an even tougher spot. Travis wasn't alone. Others that same day recounted the same story. The cost of living crisis has been a kick in the teeth, and they can't afford to pay the increases they're seeing in their mortgages with renewals, their rent, their groceries, filling up the trucker car to get to work, and heating their home. Last month, I talked to union workers alongside the leader of the Conservative Party at the Boilermakers Local 128, as well as UA Local 67, which is journeymen and pipe fitters and plumbers and their apprentices, and their training hall is actually located in my constituency in Flamborough-Glanbrook. We also talked to Leona construction workers and others. And these are the workers who built this country, and they're building our economy. Canada needs more of these skilled workers, but they also need a government that has their back, which is why we introduced this motion today. Madam Speaker, I think about my own grandfather, who was a proud union member. My Opa Block was a carpenter, and he came to Canada from the Netherlands in 1949 at the end of the Second World War in search of a better future for himself and his family. And he braved a new land and a new language, and he came a year before bringing the rest of his family. My mother was 5 when they finally came. And Opa worked hard and he saved up, but as a carpenter, he joined the union because it offered him good wages and modest benefits at that time, for him and his family. He was always a staunch supporter of the unions because unions built the middle class. And our family is an example of that. And Opa was also a card-carrying member of the NDP for almost 30 years. And so I wonder what Opa would think today about the NDP under the leadership of the current leader, who is unwaveringly supporting the Liberal government that has violated workers' rights to strike, that is increasing the cost of living on that middle class. Madam Speaker, I think it's safe to say that the NDP under the current leader is no longer my grandfather's NDP. Madam Speaker, my mom was also a union member for 45 years of her entire career as a registered nurse in Hamilton, working at various different hospitals. And for my brothers and I, we were fortunate enough to grow up in a middle-class household. And while we didn't always get everything we wanted, my mom's union job as a nurse and my dad's work in the trades as a bricklayer allowed us the middle-class dream of Canada. And I contrast that to the conversations I had on the floor of Stelco that day and in the union halls of the Hamilton area in the time since. And that middle-class dream of Canada is slipping away for workers, for people. Madam Speaker, what's ironic about the leader of the NDP is he talks a big game. The Liberals are too weak. Yet he is the one keeping the Prime Minister in power. He is the one supporting the very policies that are making life so unaffordable, especially the carbon tax, which the NDP has supported 24 times. Hear, hear. So when workers, through their unions, demand more to pay their mortgages, their rents, their groceries, their gas, to sustain that modest middle-class living on their hard work, when they also fight for safety and the gains they made in safety, as the Teamsters did this summer, the Liberals have shut down their strikes, shut down their job actions. Madam Speaker, while the NDP leader has called this out, that same leader in his caucus voted twice earlier this fall, confidence in this Liberal government. So now, with the motion we've brought forward today, the NDP have a chance to do something about it. Let's vote down this government.